The galactic palace of Aurelian had survived wars, rebellions, and cosmic storms. But on this day it was trembling because of a child. The royal hall was filled with generals, scientists, and council members, yet none of them dared to speak loudly. The reason was simple. The alien princess's child would not stop crying. The baby's cry was not normal. It was not soft or weak. Every sound carried power. Invisible waves moved through the crystal walls. Lights flickered above. Soldiers felt pressure inside their helmets. Some even stepped back in fear. This child was not only a baby, she was the heir to one of the most powerful empires in the galaxy. Princess Liriana stood in the center of the throne hall, holding her daughter carefully. Her silver skin glowed under the palace lights. But her eyes showed something rare, worry. She had faced enemy fleets without fear, but she could not stop her own child's tears. For 3 hours the baby had cried without pause. The royal healers tried advanced medicine. The scientists activated calming energy fields. Musicians played soft alien lullabies. Nothing worked. The crying only became stronger. Each cry sent small shock waves across the floor. Cracks appeared in the golden pillars. Council members whispered to one another. Some were afraid the child's unstable power could damage the palace itself. The emperor finally rose from his throne. His voice was deep and cold. He said the council would begin to question the child's stability if this continued. Those words hung heavy in the air, because in galactic politics, weakness was dangerous. Princess Liriana ignored the warning. She only looked at her daughter. The baby's tiny hands glowed with violet energy. Her cries were filled with pain, as if she felt something missing. At that moment, the massive golden doors of the hall slowly opened. The sound of crying echoed louder as everyone turned their heads. Guards moved instantly toward the entrance, weapons ready. A human walked in. He did not wear royal clothes. He did not carry a weapon. He looked almost ordinary compared to the shining alien guards around him. His name was Daniel Hayes, an engineer from Earth, brought to the palace to repair a damaged power core 2 days earlier. He stopped walking when he saw the scene in front of him. The crying baby, the frightened soldiers, the royal court watching him like he was lost. Daniel raised his hands slightly and spoke carefully. He asked if everything was all right. The crying grew louder, stronger, like the baby felt the tension around her. Guards moved to block him, but the emperor raised his hand and told them to let the human pass. Curiosity had replaced caution. Daniel walked forward slowly, each step echoing on the crystal floor. He did not know why he felt drawn closer. Maybe it was concern. Maybe it was simple human instinct when hearing a child cry. As he stepped nearer to the princess, something unexpected happened. The crying softened. At first no one noticed. Then a scientist looked at his scanner and froze. The energy spikes were lowering. Daniel blinked, confused. He did not understand what was happening. Princess Liriana felt the change immediately. Her daughter's body relaxed slightly in her arms. The hall became quieter. Daniel took one more step. The baby stopped crying completely. Silence filled the throne room, a silence so deep that even the soldiers forgot to breathe. The child slowly opened her glowing violet eyes and looked directly at Daniel. Everyone waited. Then the baby smiled. Not a small smile, but a bright, joyful smile. And then she laughed. Her laughter was soft and warm. No shock waves, no destruction, only light. A gentle glow spread across the hall like sunrise after a long night. Gasps came from every corner of the chamber. Some guards lowered their weapons. Scientists stared at their screens in disbelief. Princess Liriana felt tears rise in her eyes. Her daughter had never reacted like this before, not once since birth. The baby reached her tiny hand toward Daniel. Daniel stood frozen. He whispered that he had not done anything. But everyone in that hall knew something had changed. The emperor leaned forward slowly, his sharp eyes studying the human carefully. Princess Liriana stepped closer to Daniel and spoke quietly. She told him her daughter had cried since the moment she was born, and now she was calm because of him. Daniel felt nervous. He was only an engineer. He fixed broken machines. He did not control royal children with cosmic powers. Yet the baby continued to laugh whenever she looked at him. High above the throne hall, hidden scanners activated automatically, recording every movement, every energy shift. The Royal Council would want answers, and answers often led to fear. Because if a simple human could calm the most powerful child in the galaxy, then humans were not simple at all. And far beyond the palace walls, something ancient and silent began to awaken in deep space, responding to the sudden balance of power it had just sensed. The day that began with a crying child was turning into something far greater. And none of them understood, yet that this was the moment the galaxy quietly changed direction. If you enjoy powerful human stories like this and want to see how this mystery unfolds, make sure to subscribe to the channel and stay with the journey, because this is only the beginning. The human effect began the moment the throne hall doors closed behind Daniel, because silence had returned to the palace, but peace had not. The baby remained calm in Princess Liriana's arms, her glowing violet eyes locked on the human engineer as if she had been waiting for him her entire life, and the royal court could not decide whether to feel relieved or afraid. Daniel stood in the center of the massive chamber, suddenly aware that every powerful being in the empire was staring at him. He felt small under their gaze. He was not a warrior, not a diplomat, not even important by galactic standards. He fixed broken machines for a living. Yet somehow he had done what none of them could do. Princess Liriana slowly stepped closer to him. Her voice was softer now, almost careful. She asked him to stay where he was, because each time he moved even slightly away, the baby's fingers tightened in the air as if she feared losing him. And each time he stepped closer, her tiny body relaxed. The royal scientists rushed forward with scanning devices. Beams of light moved across Daniel's body, reading his pulse, his brain activity, his biological patterns. They expected to see something unusual, some hidden mutation or advanced technology implanted inside him. But the readings showed something almost disappointing. He was completely human, ordinary in every measurable way. Yet the child's unstable energy waves were perfectly balanced while he was near. The violent spikes that had shaken the palace were gone, replaced by smooth, steady pulses that flowed gently around her like calm water. The head scientist whispered that it was as if the baby's power had found an anchor, something solid and grounding in the human presence. The Emperor ordered Daniel to be escorted to a private chamber for further observation, not as a prisoner, but not fully as a guest either. The guards were respectful yet cautious. They understood that the human might now be the most valuable person in the Empire, and also the most dangerous if other factions learn about him. Inside the private chamber, Daniel sat on a simple metal seat, his hands resting on his knees, trying to understand what had just happened. He replayed the moment in his mind. He had only felt concern when he heard the crying. Nothing more, no strange power, no sudden knowledge, just a simple instinct to comfort a child. Princess Liriana entered the chamber alone, carrying her daughter again. The baby was awake but peaceful. Small glowing sparks danced gently around her fingers, yet they did not damage anything. It was controlled now, calm, almost playful. Liriana looked at Daniel with serious eyes. She told him that since her daughter's birth, no technology, no psychic healer, no royal blood relative had been able to calm her. The child's power had been wild and unpredictable. Many feared she might not survive her own energy, but now she was stable only when he was near. Daniel shook his head slowly. He told her he did not understand alien science or royal genetics. He only understood machines. But Liriana responded that sometimes the simplest systems are the strongest, and perhaps the child did not need power or advanced energy fields. Perhaps she needed something else. The baby reached toward Daniel again, her small hand opening and closing. He hesitated before stepping closer, but when he did, she smiled and released a soft sound that almost sounded like a giggle, and the energy in the room brightened gently. In the palace control center, alarms suddenly activated. Red lights flashed across the main screens. An officer shouted that multiple unidentified warships had entered the outer orbit of Aurelian, their dark forms blocking the distant stars. The signature matched the Zereth Dominion, a powerful rival empire that had long questioned the stability of Aurelian's royal line. The Emperor's face appeared on the chamber wall through a holographic projection. His expression was tense. He informed Liriana that the Xerath had requested immediate inspection of the child, claiming concern for galactic safety. But everyone understood the truth. If the Xerath discovered that a human could stabilize the heir's power, they would demand control of him, or eliminate him to prevent Aurelian from gaining advantage. Liriana refused the inspection without hesitation. Her voice was calm but firm. She would not allow her daughter to become a political experiment. The Emperor warned her that refusal could mean war, and the council members were already divided on how to respond. Some feared conflict, others feared weakness. As tension filled the chamber, the baby's breathing quickened slightly. Sensing the rising stress around her, small sparks flickered again around her hands. Daniel felt instinctively that the child reacted not only to his presence, but to emotional energy in the room. He spoke gently without thinking, telling everyone to calm down, telling the baby that everything was fine, his voice steady despite the fear building in his chest. Slowly, the sparks faded. The child relaxed again, and Liriana realized something important. It was not only Daniel's physical presence that mattered, it was his emotional state. His simple human calmness seemed to create a balance her daughter needed. Outside the palace, the Xerath fleet held position, massive ships casting long shadows over the planet's atmosphere. Their leader transmitted a cold message demanding compliance, warning that an unstable air threatened the peace of the galaxy. But hidden beneath their words was ambition. They wanted power, and they sensed opportunity. High above the system, far beyond the visible fleet, something ancient observed silently. An old machine buried within an asteroid field activated deeper systems. It had detected a rare signal earlier when the baby laughed, a pattern of energy it had not sensed for thousands of years. Now it confirmed the source, a human emotional resonance interacting with high-level cosmic power. And its internal protocols began calculating outcomes. Back inside the palace, Daniel finally understood the weight of his situation. He was no longer just a visiting engineer. He was leverage in a galactic conflict, a key variable that powerful empires might fight over, and he had never asked for any of it. Princess Liriana looked at him with a mix of gratitude and concern. She told him that from this moment forward, his safety would be tied to the survival of her daughter, and the survival of her daughter might now depend on him. The baby laughed again softly, unaware that entire fleets were waiting outside because of her connection to a human. And as the stars around Aurelian dimmed under the shadow of approaching war, one simple truth became clear. The human effect had begun, and it was already changing the balance of the galaxy. The Council's fear did not begin with shouting or open threats. It began with silence, a heavy, thoughtful silence that filled the highest chamber of the palace, where the ruling council gathered behind closed doors, far away from Princess Liriana, and far away from the human who had unknowingly changed everything. The chamber was circular, its walls made of dark crystal that reflected the stars outside. 12 council members floated slightly above the floor in their energy seats, their glowing eyes fixed on the holographic recordings playing in the center of the room. The footage showed the exact moment the baby stopped crying, the exact second her unstable power balanced when Daniel stepped forward. One counselor spoke first, his voice calm but sharp. He said this was not a coincidence. Another responded that humans were considered emotionally unstable and physically weak compared to advanced species, yet the evidence in front of them suggested something far more dangerous. They replayed the data again. The energy readings before Daniel entered the hall were chaotic and destructive, but once he approached, the spikes smoothed out perfectly, not reduced, not suppressed, but harmonized, as if two different frequencies had found balance together. A senior scientist addressed the council through hologram. She explained that the human brain produces complex emotional signals unlike most advanced species. Humans feel fear and compassion strongly at the same time. They balance logic and instinct in unpredictable ways, and perhaps that unpredictable emotional field created stability for the child. The chamber grew colder as the meaning settled in. If the heir to Aurelian required a human emotional presence to remain stable, then the Empire's future depended on a species they barely understood, a species that was not under their control. One counselor suggested immediate isolation of Daniel for further study. Another suggested removing him quietly before other empires discovered his importance. Because if the Xerath learned that a single human could stabilize the most powerful royal child in the galaxy, they would either capture him or declare open war to prevent Aurelian from gaining advantage. Meanwhile, in a secure wing of the palace, Daniel sat near a wide observation window, staring at the dark shapes of warships in orbit. He could see faint flashes of light as patrol fighters moved between them. He understood enough about politics to know this was serious. He felt trapped between forces far greater than himself. Princess Liriana entered quietly, her daughter asleep in her arms. The baby had not cried once since Daniel arrived. Her breathing was calm, steady, controlled. Liriana told Daniel that the council was afraid, and fear made powerful people dangerous. Daniel asked if he was in trouble. Liriana did not answer directly. Instead, she said the council would do what they believed protected the empire, even if it meant making cruel decisions. At that same moment, in the council chamber, a vote began silently. Small lights on each seat glowed as members chose their position: containment, control, or elimination. The word elimination hovered in the air like a shadow, not spoken openly, but understood by all. The vote did not reach full agreement. The council was divided. Some believed Daniel was a gift. Others believed he was a threat, but all agreed on one thing: he could not be allowed to leave the planet freely. As the debate continued, a hidden figure in the chamber activated a private communicator, sending encrypted information toward the orbiting Xerath fleet. The message was simple but dangerous. The human is the key. Back in the secure wing, the baby suddenly opened her eyes. Her small body stiffened, and a faint pulse of violet light spread through the room. Daniel felt a strange pressure in his chest, not painful, but alerting, like a warning. Liriana looked down at her daughter in confusion. The child's gaze shifted toward the corridor outside the chamber door. Her calm expression changed into quiet focus. Without warning, the lights flickered, and the chamber door began to open slowly from the outside. Two palace guards stepped inside, their movements slightly unnatural, their eyes distant. Daniel stood instinctively. Something felt wrong. The baby's fingers tightened around the air, and the violet glow intensified slightly. One of the guards raised his weapon slowly, his voice flat as he announced new orders from the council. The human was to be transferred to a classified research facility immediately. No explanation, no negotiation. Liriana stepped forward, her voice sharp with authority. She demanded to see the official council authorization, but the guards did not respond properly. Their neural implants had been overridden remotely. Daniel's heart raced. He realized this was not protection. This was containment, and containment could quickly become something worse. The baby suddenly released a small burst of controlled energy. Not violent, but precise. The weapon in the guard's hand melted instantly without harming him. The second guard fell backward as his neural override shut down. Silence returned, heavy and tense. Liriana understood immediately. Someone within the council had already acted without full agreement. Fear had moved faster than reason. High above the planet, inside the Xerath flagship, an officer received confirmation that internal conflict had begun within Aurelian's leadership. They smiled coldly, because divided empires were easier to conquer. But beyond both fleets and politics, the ancient machine hidden in deep space processed new information. The human had not reacted with aggression, only fear and instinct to protect. The child had responded with precision instead of destruction, a rare sign of emotional synchronization. Back inside the palace, Liriana turned to Daniel and finally spoke the truth. She said from this moment forward, he was not just important, he was essential, and essential people either become symbols of unity or targets of elimination. Daniel looked at the sleeping child again, her tiny hand still glowing softly, unaware that powerful beings were debating his fate in secret chambers. The council's fear had grown beyond simple politics. It was now survival instinct, because they were beginning to understand something that frightened them deeply. The future of their empire might depend not on power, not on fleets, not on ancient bloodlines, but on a single human heart. And fear of that truth was spreading faster than any invading army. The attack on the palace did not begin with explosions, it began with darkness. The lights across the eastern towers flickered once, then went completely black. Inside, the control center officers rushed to their stations. Screens filled with warning symbols. Outer defense grids were failing one by one, not destroyed, but disabled from the inside. Someone had opened a door that should never open. Above the planet, the Zereth fleet moved into formation, their ships no longer hiding behind diplomacy. Rows of heavy cruisers aligned with military precision, energy cannons glowing faintly as they powered up. The sky itself seemed to grow heavier, like a storm waiting to break. Inside the palace, Princess Liriana felt the shift instantly. She stood near the panoramic window, holding her daughter, while Daniel remained close. The baby had been calm for hours, but now her small fingers twitched again, sensing rising danger. An emergency transmission echoed through the halls. Unauthorized ships had breached the upper atmosphere. Stealth assault carriers were descending toward the capital. They had bypassed outer shields using internal clearance codes, proof that betrayal was no longer a suspicion. It was reality. Daniel swallowed hard as distant thunder shook the palace foundations. Except it was not thunder. It was orbital bombardment striking defensive platforms in the sky. Flashes of orange light reflected across the crystal walls. Liriana turned toward him, her voice steady despite the chaos. She said the Zereth would attempt to capture him alive, because if they controlled him, they controlled her daughter, and if they could not capture him, they would remove him permanently. The baby suddenly began to whimper, small sparks forming again around her hands. Not violent yet, but unstable. The calm field Daniel unknowingly created was weakening under the pressure of fear filling the palace. Then the first explosion hit the outer courtyard. The shockwave traveled through corridors, dust falling from the ceiling as alarms screamed across every level. Guards rushed into the chamber, reporting that Zereth strike units had landed directly on the palace roof. Their armor resistant to standard energy weapons, their objective was clear: reach the air. Liriana activated a hidden command panel. Thick security barriers slid into place around the chamber, but everyone understood barriers only delayed the inevitable. Daniel's mind raced. He was not trained for war. He was not a soldier, but he saw something the others did not. Every time panic rose inside the room, the baby's energy spiked dangerously. If she lost control during an assault, the destruction could be worse than any enemy attack. Another explosion rocked the floor, closer now. Screams echoed from distant halls. The baby's glow intensified sharply, violet lights swirling around her small body. The air pressure increased. Cracks began forming in the walls. Daniel stepped closer without thinking, ignoring the fear pounding in his chest. He spoke softly, telling her it was okay, telling her he was still there, his voice shaking but steady enough. For a brief second, the swirling energy slowed. Then the chamber doors exploded inward, metal fragments scattering across the floor as 3 Zereth soldiers entered, their armor dark and heavy, visors glowing red, weapons raised instantly. Time seemed to slow. Liriana prepared to unleash her own power, but she hesitated. One uncontrolled blast from her could shatter half the palace. Daniel stood between the soldiers and the princess without realizing he had moved. He had no weapon, no shield, just instinct. One Zereth soldier aimed directly at him, calculating trajectory. The baby screamed, but this scream was different. It was not chaotic, it was focused. A precise beam of violet energy shot forward, not wide, not wild. It struck the soldier's weapon only, disintegrating it into glowing particles without harming the soldier himself. The other 2 soldiers staggered in shock. Daniel did not understand what he had just witnessed, but he felt the baby's hand reaching toward him again. And when he touched her small fingers, the energy field around her stabilized instantly, the swirling storm collapsing into a controlled glow. Liriana reacted without hesitation now. releasing a concentrated pulse that knocked the remaining soldiers unconscious without killing them. She refused to become what the council feared her daughter might become. Outside the chamber, heavy footsteps echoed, palace guards engaging invading forces in brutal close combat. The once beautiful corridors now filled with smoke and sparks. High above the battlefield, the Zareth commander received reports that the air had demonstrated controlled energy projection, something previously believed impossible. And worse, it had occurred while the human was present, confirming their intelligence. He ordered a second wave to secure the target at all costs. But something unexpected happened at that exact moment. Across the entire battlefield, every electronic system on both sides flickered violently. Zareth targeting arrays failed, palace defense cannons reset automatically, communication signals scrambled. In deep space, the ancient machine had completed another calculation. The human had chosen protection over self-preservation. The child had chosen precision over destruction. Emotional harmony confirmed under threat conditions. Evaluation stage 2 initiated. Back inside the palace, Daniel helped Liriana move toward a secured escape corridor. Explosions echoing behind them. He did not know why he felt responsible, but he knew one thing clearly. If he ran alone, the child would lose control, and if the child lost control, thousands could die. Another squad of Zareth soldiers appeared at the far end of the corridor, weapons charging. The baby looked toward them calmly. No crying now, only focus. Daniel felt fear rising again, but he forced himself to breathe slowly, to stay calm for her sake. The violet light around the child expanded gently, forming a thin, transparent shield in front of them, not large enough to destroy, but strong enough to block incoming fire. The soldiers opened fire, beams striking the shield and dissolving harmlessly, their confusion visible even behind their dark visors. Liriana looked at Daniel with something new in her eyes, not just gratitude, but realization. Her daughter was not unstable. She was incomplete without balance, and that balance was human. Outside the palace, the Zareth fleet hesitated as their internal systems continued to malfunction unpredictably, as if an unseen force was interfering with their assault calculations. Inside the smoke-filled corridor, Daniel stood beside an alien princess and her powerful child, shielding them with nothing but courage and steady breathing. The attack on the palace had begun as a mission to capture a human engineer, but it was quickly becoming proof of something far more dangerous to the galaxy. Human compassion under fire was not weakness. It was power. And for the first time, the enemies of Aurelian began to understand that they were not fighting a crying child. They were fighting a connection they did not understand, and that frightened them more than any weapon ever could. The ancient machine awakens did not announce itself with light or sound. It awakened with calculation. Far beyond the orbit of Aurelian, hidden inside a drifting asteroid wrapped in layers of dark metal older than most civilizations, a structure that had been silent for thousands of years powered its core fully for the first time since ancient wars had ended. It had watched empires rise and fall. It had observed species destroy themselves through pride, and it had remained patient, waiting for a signal it was designed to recognize. That signal had finally appeared. Not a weapon discharge, not a fleet formation, not a planetary explosion, but emotional synchronization between two very different life forms under extreme threat. Inside its endless digital mind, streams of ancient code processed what it had recorded, the unstable cosmic energy of a royal heir balanced by the emotional field of a human, protection chosen over dominance, precision chosen over destruction, empathy holding back overwhelming power. The machine did not understand emotion the way organic beings did, but it understood patterns, and this pattern matched an old prophecy embedded in its creation directives. When power and compassion align, evaluation must begin. Back in the battle-scarred palace of Aurelian, Daniel and Princess Liriana had reached a secondary defensive chamber. Smoke filled the corridors behind them, distant echoes of combat still shaking the structure. The baby rested against Liriana's shoulder, calm again, her small hands glowing softly but no longer unstable. Daniel leaned against the wall, breathing heavily, his hands shaking slightly from adrenaline. He had never imagined standing between alien soldiers and a royal heir, yet he had done it without thinking, and that frightened him more than the soldiers had. Liriana studied him closely. She had seen warriors freeze in battle before, but Daniel had not frozen. He had stepped forward without weapon or shield, as if protecting the child was the most natural decision in the universe. Outside the planet's atmosphere, the Zareth commander noticed something deeply disturbing. His fleet's advanced systems were failing at random intervals, targeting software resetting without command, shield frequencies shifting unexpectedly. It was as if an invisible intelligence was rewriting small pieces of reality around them. He demanded a full diagnostic scan of surrounding space. The scan returned nothing visible. Because the machine did not exist in normal detection ranges, it operated through gravitational distortion and quantum layer observation, technology so old and advanced that modern empires had forgotten such systems were possible. Within its core, the machine expanded its observation net, focusing not only on Daniel and the child, but on the political reactions within the council chamber. It analyzed fear levels, betrayal signals, aggression patterns from the Zareth fleet, and emotional resonance from the palace defenders. Its conclusion began forming slowly. Human emotional fields were chaotic, unpredictable, yet remarkably adaptive under stress. Unlike most advanced species whose emotional evolution had become structured and limited, humans retained raw instinct combined with empathy, a rare combination the machine's creators once valued deeply. Long ago, the machine had been built by a civilization that believed power without compassion always led to extinction. Its role was not to rule, but to judge, to intervene only when a species reached a critical evolutionary crossroads. Aurelian had reached that point. The heir possessed enormous destructive potential, unstable yet vast. The Zareth represented controlled dominance driven by fear, and the human represented something different, balanced through connection rather than control. Back inside the council chamber, panic spread as reports of system malfunctions arrived. Some council members accused each other of sabotage. Others suspected hidden Zareth technology, but none considered the possibility that something far older had entered the game. One counselor secretly transmitted another message to the Zareth fleet, promising coordinates to the humans' location in exchange for future political protection. Fear had fully corrupted reason now. The machine detected the transmission instantly, tagging the traitor as a destabilizing variable. In the orbit above, the Zareth commander prepared a final strike team, elite units designed to breach any defense, their orders clear: secure the human at any cost, terminate all resistance if necessary. Inside the secondary chamber, the baby suddenly opened her eyes again, but this time she did not react to fear or danger. Her gaze lifted slightly upward, as if she sensed something watching beyond walls and stars. Daniel felt it too, not physically, but emotionally, a strange calm spreading through him despite the chaos outside. Without warning, every combat system across the battlefield shut down simultaneously. Weapons on both sides powered off, shields collapsed safely instead of violently. Warships froze in orbit as their engines entered for standby. Silence fell across the planet. The Zareth commander shouted orders, but his control panels displayed only one symbol, an ancient glyph none of his officers recognized. Inside the palace, lights stabilized, alarms ceased. Above the asteroid, the machine revealed itself partially, projecting a massive energy construct into visible space, a silent geometric shape made of shifting light and gravity distortion. A transmission echoed across every ship, every station, every communicator in the system. It did not use spoken language. It transmitted meaning directly into neural systems. Evaluation in progress. Civilizations of Aurelian and Zareth. Your conflict has triggered ancient protocols. Power imbalance detected. Emotional harmony candidate identified. Human subject designated as stabilizing variable. All hostilities suspended pending judgment. Fear rippled through both fleets because no empire controlled this voice. In the palace chamber, Liriana tightened her hold on her daughter, understanding that this presence was beyond politics and beyond war. Daniel looked toward the ceiling, feeling strangely exposed, as if the universe itself was measuring him. The machine began its final calculation phase, assessing whether humanity represented a threat to galactic stability or the missing element required for survival of high-energy species like Aurelian. For the first time in thousands of years, it prepared to make a decision that could reshape the balance of power across the stars. And at the center of that decision was not a weapon, not a fleet, not an emperor, but a simple human who chose to stand in front of a child instead of running away. The ancient machine had awakened, and its judgment would not favor fear. It would favor balance. And balance, it was discovering, might wear a human face. The choice did not arrive as a command. It arrived as a question that no one else could answer for him. The ancient machine's presence filled the sky like a silent judge, its geometric light structure hanging above Aurelian's orbit, neither hostile nor friendly, just watching, calculating, deciding. Every fleet in the system remained frozen in forced standby, weapons offline, engines locked, commanders powerless. For the first time in centuries, war had been paused by something greater than fear. Inside the secondary palace chamber, Daniel felt the weight of invisible eyes on him. Not physical eyes, but something deeper, as if the universe itself was measuring his thoughts. Princess Liriana stood beside him, her daughter calm in her arms, violet light glowing softly around the child like a controlled heartbeat. Then the machine spoke again, its message flowing directly into their minds, bypassing language barriers, bypassing sound. Human subject Daniel Hayes, you are identified as stabilizing variable for high-energy royal entity. Your presence alters destructive probability outcomes by 73%. Daniel swallowed. He did not understand advanced probability models, but he understood one thing clearly: he mattered in this equation. The machine continued. Conflict between Aurelian and Zareth stems from imbalance of power and fear of instability. The child's uncontrolled potential previously justified intervention by dominant forces. Your presence removes that justification. Liriana's eyes narrowed slightly. She realized what this meant before Daniel did. The machine offered a solution. Human subject may be extracted from system and relocated safely beyond Zareth influence. In absence of stabilizing variable, child's instability returns. External intervention resumes. Galactic balance maintained through controlled oversight. The word struck like cold steel. If Daniel left, the child would lose control again. The Zareth would claim justification to interfere, possibly even seize the throne under the excuse of protecting the galaxy. Aurelian would survive, but not freely. If he stayed, the balance would shift permanently. The child would grow stable and powerful under her own control. Zareth influence would weaken, and the galaxy would enter a new era where humans held unexpected importance. The machine's tone did not change. Choice required. Daniel felt his chest tighten. This was no longer about surviving an attack. This was about deciding the direction of an empire, maybe even multiple empires. Liriana stepped closer, her voice soft but steady. She told him he owed them nothing. He had been brought to repair a power core, not to become a symbol in galactic politics. If he chose to leave, she would not blame him. Daniel looked at the baby. She stared back at him with quiet curiosity, her tiny hand reaching toward him again. When he moved closer, her glow brightened gently, stable and warm. He remembered the first moment in the throne hall, the silence after the crying stopped, the laughter that followed. He remembered standing in front of armed soldiers without thinking, not because he was brave, but because running had not felt right. The machine began counting down probability collapse windows, indicating that prolonged delay would result in systems reactivating and fleets resuming combat posture. Outside the chamber, council members argued fiercely through secure channels. Some demanded Daniel accept extraction to remove the Empire's dependence on a human. Others insisted he must remain at all costs, fear and pride clashing in equal measure. The Xerath commander, though frozen in position, received partial data streams revealing the machine's offer. He understood the implication immediately. If the human left, Aurelian would weaken again. If the human stayed, Xerath dominance in the region would decline permanently. Daniel finally spoke aloud. Even though the machine did not require sound, he said he was not a hero. He did not want power. He did not understand ancient cosmic systems. But he understood responsibility. He looked at Liriana and said that if leaving meant the child would suffer again, then leaving was not an option. The baby laughed softly at that moment, as if confirming his words. Liriana's expression changed, not relief exactly, but recognition. She saw that this was not forced loyalty, not political pressure. It was a human choosing connection over safety. The machine processed his decision instantly, probability models recalculating across billions of outcomes. Choice confirmed. Human subject remains. Galactic intervention protocols adjusted. Across orbit, Xerath warships lost override authority permanently. Their control systems returning, but restricted by external supervision. Aurelian defense grids stabilized at enhanced levels, but with new safeguards preventing aggressive expansion. The machine had not chosen a side. It had chosen balance. Its final message echoed through every mind in the system. Civilizations evolve when power aligns with empathy. Dominance without balance results in extinction. Human integration into high-energy governance approved under observation status. The geometric construct above the planet began to fade slowly, not disappearing completely, but shifting into a distant observational state, its role now reduced to monitoring rather than intervening. Inside the chamber, Daniel felt the invisible pressure lift. Systems across the palace rebooted fully. Fleets regained movement, but no one fired a single shot. The Xerath commander, understanding he had lost more than a battle, ordered a strategic withdrawal, not out of fear, but out of calculation. The balance of power had shifted in a way he could not control anymore. Liriana stepped closer to Daniel and spoke quietly. She told him he had just changed the future of her daughter and possibly the galaxy, not through strength, but through choice. Daniel exhaled slowly, realizing that staying meant more than surviving. It meant commitment. He was no longer just an engineer visiting an alien world. He was now part of its destiny. The baby rested her glowing hand against his chest, her energy stable and calm. The choice had been made, not by emperors, not by fleets, not by ancient machines, but by a human who decided that some responsibilities are worth the risk. And the consequences of that choice were only beginning to unfold. Humanity's place in the stars was not announced with celebration. It was realized slowly, in silence, in the space between what had almost happened and what had been prevented. The Xerath fleet withdrew in perfect formation, their ships turning away from Aurelian without firing a final shot. But it was not retreat born from defeat. It was retreat born from calculation. They understood now that the balance of the region had shifted in a way no fleet could easily correct, and that frightened them more than war ever had. Above the planet, the ancient machine remained faintly visible as a distant geometric shimmer, no longer dominating the sky, but still watching, its evaluation complete, yet its observation ongoing. It had made a rare decision. It had allowed evolution rather than enforcement. Inside the Grand Throne Hall, repairs were already underway. Cracks in the crystal pillars sealed slowly, damaged walls reshaped by reconstruction fields. The palace would stand strong again, but everyone present knew something deeper had changed, something that could not be repaired or undone. Daniel stood quietly near one of the tall windows overlooking the city below. He could see lights returning across the capital, citizens stepping outside after hours of uncertainty, unaware of how close their world had come to becoming a battlefield, unaware that a decision made in a hidden chamber had altered their future. Princess Liriana entered the hall carrying her daughter. The baby's violet glow now steady and gentle, not wild, not unstable, but controlled like a calm star learning its own gravity. The council members gathered once more, But their voices were no longer filled with fear. Now there was caution, curiosity, and something unexpected: respect. One senior counselor spoke carefully, acknowledging that the Empire's survival had depended not on fleets or weapons, but on the presence of a human who had chosen to remain when leaving would have been safer. The words were not dramatic, but they carried weight. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. He had never wanted recognition. He had wanted to fix a power core and return home. Yet home now felt different, smaller somehow, because the universe had revealed something much larger. Liriana approached him before the entire council and declared publicly that from this moment forward, Daniel Hayes would hold the title of Guardian of the Air, not as a symbol of control, but as a symbol of balance. The room did not protest, because everyone had seen what happened when fear ruled the situation, and everyone had seen what happened when calm compassion entered it. Far beyond Aurelian, word of the ancient machine's intervention spread through hidden channels. Other empires studied the event carefully, analyzing battle data, energy harmonics, political shifts. They could not ignore the conclusion: a human emotional field had stabilized one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy, and that meant humanity was no longer a minor developing species. It was a variable in galactic stability. On Earth, governments would soon receive quiet contact from Aurelian representatives. Not threats, not demands, but invitations, cooperation proposals framed carefully to avoid panic. Humanity's entrance into greater galactic affairs would not begin with invasion. It would begin with partnership. Back in the palace, the baby looked up at Daniel again, her small hand reaching toward him as it had in the beginning. When he stepped closer, her laughter filled the hall once more, soft and warm. No shockwaves, no damage, just joy. The sound echoed differently now. It did not represent instability. It represented control. Liriana realized something powerful in that moment. Her daughter did not need dominance to be strong. She needed connection, and connection was something humanity understood deeply, perhaps more deeply than any advanced civilization that had refined emotion into cold logic. Daniel finally spoke openly, not as a hero, not as a political figure, but as himself. He said humans were not the strongest species, not the most advanced, but they were stubborn when it came to protecting others, especially children, and maybe that stubbornness had value beyond Earth. The council listened carefully. The ancient machine, still observing, updated its long-term projections. Civilizations with balanced power and empathy showed higher survival rates across millennia, and Aurelian's probability of extinction had just decreased dramatically. The Zareth commander, watching from deep space, reported to his own council that direct confrontation with Aurelian was no longer advisable. Instead, diplomatic recalibration would be required. Even dominance-driven empires adapt when faced with forces they cannot easily defeat. Night settled over Aurelian peacefully for the first time since the crisis began. Stars shone clearly without the shadow of warships blocking them. Daniel stood on a balcony beside Liriana, looking at the sky where the ancient machine shimmered faintly. He asked quietly if it would ever leave completely. Liriana replied that perhaps it never truly leaves, perhaps it waits, watching for the next moment when power and fear collide again. The baby rested calmly in her arms, glowing gently like a controlled star. Humanity's place in the stars was no longer a question of strength. It was a question of balance. And in a galaxy filled with ancient empires, advanced weapons, and forgotten machines, it turned out that the rarest power was not destruction. It was the simple choice to stay, to protect, to care. And because of that choice, the galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again.